Have you ever stepped into a place where everyone expected you to fail just because of how you looked? The morning Samuel Carter drove his battered Ford pickup onto the private airstrip outside Jackson, Mississippi, he felt the full weight of that old, familiar judgment. The air was sharp with the scent of jet fuel and morning dew. The sun barely edged above the horizon, painting streaks of gold across the gleaming fuselages parked like prizes behind a chain-link fence. Samuel was not the kind of man people pictured when they thought about private jets. His wide-brimmed straw hat, sun-stained and sweat-soaked, had seen more harvests than most men had seen birthdays. His denim shirt, sleeves rolled to weathered elbows, and the patched overalls marked him as a man who worked the land with his hands. As he stepped out, his boots crunched over gravel and dust, trailing a little line of Mississippi behind him, all the way to the glass doors of the executive hangar. Inside, marble floors shone beneath his heavy steps. 3 or 4 men in sharp gray suits clustered by the reception desk, coffee cups in manicured hands, their voices low and confident. Samuel could feel their eyes sweep over him. Boots, dirt, faded hat, sun-dark skin. Measuring him, dismissing him, before he even spoke a word. He'd seen those looks since he was a boy, the kind that could make a man shrink inside himself if he didn't know who he was. But Samuel Carter was a man who knew exactly who he was. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and strode toward the reception, as if he owned the place. The largest of the suited men, a tall, narrow fellow with slicked-back hair and a name tag that read Elliot Blake, caught sight of Samuel first. His polite smile flickered, landing on the mud around Samuel's boots, then ricocheted back up to the battered hat and tired overalls. "Good morning," Samuel said, his voice as solid as the Mississippi clay that raised him. He extended a broad, calloused hand. "Name's Samuel Carter. I'm here to see about buying a jet." You could have heard a pin drop. Elliot's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. You're here to buy a jet, sir?" His tone balanced between politeness and disbelief, every syllable stretched taut like a fence wire ready to snap. "That's right," Samuel replied, unblinking. "I've done my homework." For a moment, Elliot seemed to weigh whether this was a prank or just some country fool with more ambition than sense. But Samuel didn't budge. His hand stayed out, steady as a tractor at sunrise. Eventually, Elliot shook it, though you'd think he'd just touched barbed wire, and gestured toward the glossy, sun-washed showroom. "Of course, Mr. Carter, if you'll follow me." As they walked, Samuel took in the row of jets gleaming under the lights. Each was a study in polished ambition, luxury stitched into every curve and detail. They looked almost like spaceships, so far from the tractors and grain silos of home that for a second Samuel wondered if he was in over his head. But he remembered the faces of the men and women who worked his land, the families who depended on him. He thought of the little town he'd grown up in, where being underestimated was as normal as the morning sun. He pressed forward. Elliot, ever the salesman, started his pitch. "This here's the Maverick 300, he said, pausing in front of a jet with a sleek, predatory look. "Ideal for executives, 8 seats, luxurious interior, and top-of-the-line amenities. Starting at $3.5 million. He watched Samuel carefully, waiting for the shock, the retreat. But Samuel just ran his fingers along the smooth hull, feeling the chill of the metal. "How much weight can she handle in the cargo hold?" Samuel asked, his voice low and practical. Elliot faltered, caught off guard. "Well, most customers use it for executives and their luggage. Are you sure that's what you're looking for, Mr. Carter?" Samuel met his gaze, even and unbothered. "I'm not flying executives, Mr. Blake. I'm flying produce, dairy, meat. I need a plane that'll keep my product cold and get it across the country faster than any truck ever could. Can it do that?" A pause. Elliot's mouth twitched, as if fighting a smirk. "Well, this is a luxury aircraft, not exactly a delivery truck." Samuel smiled, a slow, knowing curve, the kind that comes from years of watching seeds grow despite all odds. "Sometimes, Mr. Blake, what a man needs is more than what other folks can see." There was a tension now. Elliot, sensing this deal slipping into unfamiliar territory, glanced over Samuel's shoulder, almost hoping someone else would step in. That's when another man approached, a little older, with a kind, open face and a friendlier energy. "Morning, I'm Tom Hayes, head of sales. Anything I can help with?" Tom asked, shaking Samuel's hand firmly. Samuel explained his needs. "I'm Samuel Carter, owner of Carter Farms. We supply fresh produce, milk, and meat to grocery chains across 10 states. Last year, we did over $12 million in sales, and demand's rising. I want a jet that can haul our products, fresh, fast, no frills. Can you make that happen?" Tom's face lit up with genuine interest. "That's impressive, Mr. Carter. The Maverick 300 is versatile. Cargo capacity up to 2,500 pounds. We can customize the interior for cold storage if needed. Want to take a look inside?" Elliot hung back, arms crossed, skepticism barely hidden. But Tom ushered Samuel up the steps into the pristine cabin. Leather seats, soft lighting, an atmosphere worlds away from the hard realities of farming life. Tom walked Samuel through every feature, listening carefully as Samuel asked about modifications for cooling systems, weight distribution, loading options. Outside, Elliot hovered, visibly uneasy. When they stepped off the jet, he tried once more to put Samuel in his place. "What kind of operation do you run exactly?" Elliot asked, his words edged with doubt. Samuel answered unwavering. "I built Carter Farms from nothing. We feed tens of thousands of families. I'm not here for show, I'm here for business." Something changed in Tom's expression, a flicker of respect, a recognition that the man in front of him was the real deal. Elliot, for the first time, looked unsure. The old certainty that money and power always wore a suit, always sounded a certain way, seemed to falter. As the conversation shifted to price, customization, and logistics, Samuel kept his composure, fielding every upsell with quiet firmness. He wasn't going to be fleeced or impressed by empty luxury. When Tom offered to set up a meeting with the customization team, Samuel agreed, nodding at Elliot with a look that said, "I'm not the man you thought I was." Before they could head inside, a commotion caught Samuel's ear. A young black man in a maintenance uniform was talking, almost pleading, with a gray-haired manager near the front desk. Samuel paused, drawn by something in the young man's posture, a familiar blend of hope and frustration. He turned to Tom and Elliot. "Give me a minute, gentlemen." As Samuel approached, the manager's polite mask slid into place. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, tone clipped. Samuel ignored him, looking to the young man. "You all right, son?" The young man straightened, determination in his eyes. "I'm Derek Porter, sir, trying to get into the maintenance apprenticeship program. But, well, I don't exactly fit the profile they want." Samuel recognized himself in Derek. The same fire, the same stubborn refusal to quit. He turned to the manager. "Why's that? Not enough experience or something else?" The manager stammered, unprepared. "No, sir, just a lot of applicants." Samuel cut him off with a calm, measured authority. "If I'm buying a jet from you, I want to know you give people a fair shot. Talent's everywhere. Sometimes it just needs a door open." Derek looked at Samuel, gratitude and hope mingling on his face. The manager, caught between losing a sale and losing face, nodded stiffly. "We'll take another look, sir." Samuel clapped Derek on the shoulder. "Don't let anybody tell you what you can or can't be. You get your foot in the door and show them what you're made of." As Samuel rejoined Tom and Elliot, there was a new energy in the air. A quiet shift, as if one man's courage to ask for more had stirred something deeper than any sale. For the first time, Elliot was silent, and Tom just grinned. Samuel Carter had come to buy a jet. But before the deal was even signed, he'd already changed more than anyone expected, starting with the people who thought they could judge him at a glance. It wasn't the first time Samuel Carter had sat across a table from men who thought their degrees or city addresses made them smarter than him. But this time, it felt different. Maybe it was the echo of his boots in the marble halls, or the memory of Derek's hopeful face. Either way, Samuel knew. This negotiation was about more than a jet, it was about respect. Tom Hayes and Elliot Blake led Samuel into a glass-walled conference room, its view overlooking a runway shimmering in the morning sun. Someone brought coffee. Samuel politely refused the latte, asking for his black and strong, the way he'd drunk it at sunrise for 30 years. On the polished table, a stack of glossy brochures lay open. Diagrams, interior photos, technical specs for every aircraft from the Maverick 300 to jets so big they could carry a basketball team. Elliot pushed the numbers. Base price, custom work, projected timelines. The salesman's confidence had returned. Maybe he'd convinced himself that the farmer deal would be over fast. Samuel leafed through the pages with slow, careful hands. He didn't rush, didn't fumble. He read every detail, asked sharp questions about cargo weight, refrigeration systems, safety records, insurance. Tom answered with a steady professionalism, increasingly impressed by Samuel's command of the details. "Would you like to see the financing options, Mr. Carter?" Elliot asked with the faintest curl to his lips. Samuel almost smiled. "No need. Carter Farms runs on cash. I won't be taking on debt for a gamble." Tom raised an eyebrow, surprised. "That's quite unusual, Mr. Carter. Most clients in this market finance at least a portion." Samuel shrugged. "Maybe they aren't as careful with their pennies as I am with mine." He could feel Elliot recalculating behind his eyes, maybe now wondering if this farmer was really who he appeared to be. But the real test was about to begin. Tom excused himself to fetch the head of customization. That left Samuel alone with Elliot, tension thickening the air. For a moment, there was only the soft hum of distant engines and the faint buzz of the air conditioning. Then Elliot broke the silence. "I have to admit, Mr. Carter," he said, voice lower, "when you walked in, I didn't expect you to be sitting here, seriously considering a purchase like this." Samuel kept his eyes on the window, watching a jet taxi out onto the sunlit tarmac. "That's the thing about expectations, Mr. Blake. They belong to the person making them, not to me." Elliot shifted, uncomfortable. "Most of our clients are, well, different backgrounds. CEOs, athletes, investors. It's just rare." Samuel finally turned, meeting Elliot's gaze head-on. "I grew up in a house with a leaky roof. I watched my parents sell the family's best cow to keep the lights on one winter. I know what it means to have nothing, and I know what it takes to build something that lasts. A jet's just a tool, but I know how to use my tools." A flush crept up Elliot's neck. For the first time, he looked less like a gatekeeper and more like a man wondering what stories he'd never bothered to hear. Just then, Tom returned, trailing a wiry woman in a navy blazer, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carter, this is Julia, our customization manager. She can walk you through how we'd retrofit the Maverick for your needs." Julia shook Samuel's hand with a firm grip. "Always happy to see a new kind of project. We can replace the luxury seating with climate-controlled cargo bays, reinforce the floor, install rapid cooling refrigeration, optimize load doors for pallets instead of luggage." Samuel nodded, listening intently, adding his own thoughts. How produce crates needed to stack safely, how air circulation could mean the difference between fresh and spoiled by the time they landed. Julia was intrigued, scribbling notes, even offering ideas Samuel hadn't thought of. For 20 minutes, the room transformed, not into a battlefield, but a workshop where vision and practicality met. Tom, quietly observing, realized that Samuel wasn't just a buyer. He was a builder, a man who saw possibility where others saw boundaries. At last, Julia asked, "Anything else you need to make this work?" Samuel paused. "One more thing. I want a maintenance contract, regular service, and a say in who's on the team. I saw a young man out there, Derek Porter. I want him on the roster. If you need a recommendation, I'll write it." Elliot and Tom exchanged glances. It was unusual, but the request was clear and uncompromising. "We can make that happen," Tom said simply. Samuel's face softened, a glimmer of satisfaction passing through his tough exterior. "Then let's draw up the contract." The truth comes out. As the paperwork came in, pages and pages of legalese, Tom explained each clause, while Elliot hovered, now far less sure of himself. Once he tried to slide in an optional luxury package. Walnut trim, champagne fridge, VIP entertainment system. Samuel slid the sheet back. "No need. If I want to impress people, I'll show them my tomatoes." Even Julia laughed at that, and Tom smiled. The deal began to feel less like a sale and more like the beginning of a partnership. But Samuel knew he wasn't done. As he signed the final page, he paused, pen hovering over the signature line. "I want one more thing in writing," he said, locking eyes with Elliot. "I want your assurance that folks who walk in here, no matter what boots they wear, get the same chance as any man in a suit. Your job isn't just selling planes, it's selling possibility." Elliot opened his mouth, hesitated, then nodded. "You have my word, Mr. Carter." Samuel nodded once, then pressed his signature onto the page. The news spread quickly through the hangar. The farmer had bought a jet. No loan, no haggling, just straight talk and hard-earned money. Even the mechanics came out to watch as Samuel and Tom shook hands, the ink drying on the biggest sale of the month. One of the younger staff, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, approached Samuel as he was about to leave. "Sir, I'm sorry about before. I shouldn't have." Samuel stopped him with a raised hand. "Son, if you're going to be sorry for something, let it be for doubting yourself. You see someone working hard? You help them up. That's how we build things that last." He left them with that, boots echoing down the hallway, hat in hand. A lesson etched in glass and steel. Back outside, Tom walked Samuel to his truck, paperwork in hand, the future suddenly brighter. "You know, Mr. Carter," Tom said, "I think you just taught us more in a day than most clients teach in a year." Samuel smiled, climbing into his dusty Ford. "That's how you grow a harvest, Tom. One seed at a time. Maybe next time, nobody'll be surprised to see a farmer walk in." He started the engine, letting it rumble to life, the same way he had started his own journey, with grit, hope, and the stubborn belief that anything was possible if you refused to let the world define your limits. As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the hangar windows, he could see Tom and even Elliot watching him go. Not with doubt, but with a new kind of respect, maybe even gratitude. Samuel Carter had come to buy a jet, but what he'd really purchased was a shift in perspective, a reminder that greatness often walks in wearing boots, carrying the dust of honest work. The hum of Samuel's old Ford faded into the Mississippi morning, but inside the executive hangar, his presence lingered like the echo of a storm. It didn't take long for word to ripple beyond those marble halls. By noon, the news had reached the main office. "Farmer pays cash for private jet, shocks sales team." A headline made for small-town gossip, but what happened next was more than a story for the water cooler. The call that changed everything. 2 days after the deal, Samuel stood in his farmhouse kitchen, coffee steaming in a chipped mug, when the landline rang, a rarity these days. On the other end was a reporter from the regional news, her voice half excited, half apologetic. "Mr. Carter, is it true you walked into Gold Star Aviation and bought a jet? Cash down? People are saying you turned the place upside down." Samuel chuckled. "Depends who you ask, ma'am." To me, it was just a business day. But as the story spread, first local, then regional, then to national news outlets, Samuel realized something was happening. He watched as the narrative shifted, not just about a purchase, but about a man who refused to let others judge his worth. People who'd never met him started sending letters to the farm, some with gratitude, some with hope, and a few with questions about how to begin their own journey. Carter Farm's website saw a surge in traffic. Orders rolled in from grocery chains in states Samuel had only dreamed of reaching. Even more unexpected, a phone call came from a major logistics firm asking about partnerships. "We've been watching your story, Mr. Carter. We think you're onto something with direct-to-store air delivery. Are you interested in scaling up?" Samuel, never one to get ahead of himself, took down the details and smiled. For years, he'd chased opportunity. Now, opportunity was knocking at his door. Back at the hangar, meanwhile, the atmosphere at Gold Star Aviation had changed. Derek Porter, the young maintenance applicant, was called into the manager's office. This time not for rejection, but to sign his acceptance letter. "We'd like you to start Monday, Derek," the manager said, voice tight but respectful. "Mr. Carter spoke highly of you. Don't let us down." Derek grinned, nerves replaced by hope. For the first time in his life, someone outside his family had bet on his future. Even Elliot Blake, the once arrogant salesman, began to see things differently. The morning after Samuel's visit, he gathered the staff. We made a mistake this week, Elliot admitted. We let appearances cloud our judgment. From now on, we greet every person who walks in that door like they're here to buy the whole fleet. Because one day they just might. Some snickered, but most nodded, chastened. Samuel's lesson echoed off the glass and steel. A ripple in the community. The real impact was felt in the rural towns where Samuel's story became legend. Kids at the local high school asked their teachers, "Can you really just walk in and buy a jet?" Old-timers at the diner debated whether Samuel had won the lottery or was simply the best farmer this side of the river. But the ones who knew Samuel best, his workers, neighbors, and family, knew the truth. Grit, kindness, and relentless vision had fueled every step. A week later at Sunday service, the preacher used Samuel's story in his sermon. God doesn't judge us by our clothes or the dust on our boots. He judges the heart and what you do when the world says no. After church, Samuel was the last to leave, as always. On his way out, a little girl in braids ran up, eyes shining. "Mr. Carter, when I grow up, I want to fly a jet too." He knelt down, matching her hopeful gaze. "You can do anything you set your mind to, darling. Don't let anybody tell you different." A jet for more than cargo. When the Maverick 300 arrived at Carter Farms, it was more than a machine. The mechanics, Derek now among them, installed the climate controls, reinforced the floors, and painted the Carter Farms logo along the tail. The day the first shipment went out, workers gathered to watch. For many, it was the first time they'd seen a jet up close. Samuel invited his entire crew to stand on the tarmac. He didn't give a speech, just nodded at the aircraft, then at his people. "This is ours. You built this with me." One worker, Rosa, wiped away a tear. "I used to think the world was set in stone, Mr. Carter. Now I think maybe we can change it." Samuel smiled. "One shipment at a time, Rosa." The Maverick lifted off, heavy with crates of tomatoes, milk, and hope. In the cockpit, the pilot radioed back. "We'll be in Dallas before lunch, Mr. Carter. Fresh as the morning the last word months passed." Carter Farm's success became a case study for agricultural innovation. Other farmers called wanting advice. Schools invited Samuel to speak, not about jets, but about never accepting limits set by others. Sometimes he accepted. Mostly he stayed in his fields, hands in the dirt, where he felt closest to home. Derek thrived as a mechanic, soon training others, each new hire a chance to open one more door for the next dreamer. Gold Star Aviation updated its hiring policy, publicly pledging fair opportunities for all. Elliot, changed by humility, built a reputation as the salesman who looked beyond the suit. Tom and Julia became trusted partners, helping other unconventional clients find the right solutions. Samuel never bragged about the jet nor the headlines. But whenever a stranger, young or old, stopped him in town to say, "Thank you for showing us what's possible," he'd tip his hat and smile. "Nothing's impossible," he'd reply. "You just have to walk in and ask." A legacy beyond the runway. Late one evening, Samuel walked the rows of corn behind his house. Above him, a jet streaked across the twilight sky. Maybe not his, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the road he'd opened for others, the hearts he'd changed, the lesson he'd left behind. Success isn't measured by the shine of your shoes or the name stitched into your jacket. It's measured by the doors you open, the chances you give, and the courage to walk into any room. Boots and all, knowing you belong. And sometimes all it takes to change the world is one farmer, one dream, and the courage to ignore every laugh along the way.